Hi everyone, and welcome to what's hopefully going to be a fairly short guitar project. And well, what do we have here? So I've not really ever had a guitar with Floyd Rose trem system before, so you can do some of the wilder, tremolo arm tricks, and thought I'd remedy that by getting hold of a guitar and purchase this. And it's not, as you'll probably know if you know your guitars, it's not the actual Steve Vai Ibanez JEM signature guitar. That's about £2,500, somewhere around there. This is actually their cheaper JEM Junior, which is a kind of Indonesian made copy, for want of a better word. There are kits out there on the internet you can get of this guitar as well, but they're basswood bodies, and this one's actually mahogany, which was partially why I bought it once I discovered that. However, it's this was about £370, something like that, so pretty cheap, and obviously being cheap, they'll have cut various corners on this guitar, and it won't obviously be as well appointed as the Japanese JEM, or is it American? I can't remember if it's made in America or Japan now. But the higher end instrument, there's going to be some corners cut on here. So what I'm going to do is hopefully spruce it up, if you like. I've taken it out of the box about 4 or 5 days ago and noodled about with it, doing practice scales and all that kind of stuff, which is a good way of finding out where issues might be on the neck and stuff, and worked out what I'm going to need to do with it. So what I will be doing with it, first thing I needed to do was adjust the tremolo, because it was leaning too far forward, and the plate here should be parallel with the body in its fully tuned position. So I needed to sort that out. That's really a case of slackening off the locking nut and adjusting the springs. So these two screws here pull on this claw, or hold this claw in place, and give an anchor, if you like, for these springs, which then counteract the tension of the strings on the other side, and they need to be kind of in perfect balance. Now, it's a little bit complicated and fiddly, because what you need to do is make an adjustment on the claw on the back, then retune the guitar. And tuning a Floyd Rose is not trivial, mainly because if you do it in the way that you would normally tune the strings, from low to high E, or that's the way I normally tune them, what it does is you'll put tension on this side of the bridge, and it will pull the plate forward slightly, which then slackens off this side of the bridge, or these, the higher strings on the other side, which means that they go out of tune. Then you tighten those up, and then these will go out of tune again. So you have to kind of work your way from the outside in. I guess you might be able to work your way from the inside out as well, for that matter, and tune them up. And it's quite a slow process, but anyway. So you make an adjustment on the claw, retune the guitar, and then check to see, once everything's kind of rested in its neutral position, where the strings are tuned up and counteracting the springs on the back, check whether this is parallel. And I used a micrometer just to check the distance at the front and the back of the bridge here to do that. So that's all set up. Hopefully that won't need doing again, but may do. And then we come on to the rest of the guitar. So it's got very low action. In fact, it's incredibly low compared to most of my other guitars, and does have some buzz. I don't know if you can you can hear it definitely on there, on the B string there. Look, it's got some buzz around this area here, and then it goes away as you get further up. Now that indicates either that you've got some frets that need leveling, or you've got a slight back bow on the neck. And I've checked using a straight edge here, using a 25.5 inch Fender scale length, which is what this has got, and there is a very slight back bow here, which is causing the buzz. So now I've tuned all this up, I'm going to take the strings off completely now and straighten the neck out, and then do a fret job as well, just to make sure. Now this again differs, and this is another cost saving measure. where they've not put the labour, if you like, into the neck. One thing is these frets are in desperate need of a polish. When you're bending strings on them, it's like running over sandpaper. Now that would smooth out over time, but it's best just to polish them up, so that's one thing it's going to need doing anyway. The other thing is, and I've already done this actually, is I gave the fretboard an oil because it was so dry that the wood was this shade before I started oiling it, and now it's this shade. So that's another job that needs doing on it. Now, whilst I've got the strings off, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this plain white scratch plate and also the trussel cover, and we'll be using pearl. Let me just show you that. There's a sheet that I've already got of white purloin scratch plate material, and we'll be doing that on the CNC. Let me think, what else have we got on here? Another job I did on here was, as with most of the tone and volume pots you get, they tend to have gold writing on the inside. Now with all this black nickel finish, if you like, furniture on here, that didn't really match. So what I've actually done is taken some gunmetal acrylic paint, basically dropped some paint over the top of the lettering and the numbering on these, then taken some acrylic thinners on a cloth and just lightly buffed that off, the excess off, which then leaves you with this one, which is an experiment I did before I used one of the real instruments. So there you go. They match better with the instrument now. And that's really going to be about it. So I'll get on with the neck job now. I've done a video, I think it's a double neck guitar series, if you want to see how to essentially flatten and polish all the frets, straighten the neck up and do fret leveling. I'll put a link to that, or there'll be a caption on the screen hopefully you can click on if I remember to do it. I'm notorious for forgetting to do that kind of stuff, and then that'll show you how to do the fret and the neck job on this. But what we'll do now is we'll step over to Fusion 360 and I'll show you how I create the scratch plate for this, which actually is not the standard JEM in a couple of instances, and I'll show you that when we get over there. So let's step over to Fusion 360 and get underway with that. Okay, so here we are on the computer, but we're not in Fusion 360 to start with. We're actually in a package called Cut 2D from Vectric, which is a package that I used to use for CAM and doing 2D CAD some years ago before Fusion 360, but it's still useful for converting PDFs into DXF file formats that I can then use to load into Fusion. Also, you can see on this plan for the JEM that I've got from the internet somewhere that there's an awful lot of stuff on here that we don't need, and considering that all the curves on this diagram will be made up by very small segments or very small lines, it will bog down Fusion 360 pretty badly. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to select a lot of the stuff that we don't need and delete it. Right, I think that'll do. We can take this across. So all we do now is save this, export, select the vectors first, export, we'll export as a DXF. I've already done that on here, so is JEM scratch plate DXF. We'll just save it as whatever it gives us, JEM 1, and then we can shut this down and get into Fusion 360. Won't even bother saving the original file. So what we do to import into Fusion 360 is click on this upload button. You can see I've already got a load of other stuff already in here. We just find the JEM DXF and we can just drag and drop that onto the drag and drop here bit, funnily enough, and click upload. And we just need to wait a few seconds whilst that uploads to the Fusion 360 cloud, and there you go, it's finished now. So we can double click that and that should give us a sketch. There we go. So we've got our sketch. We've got a lot of geometry and lines on here that we don't really need, so we can go in now and edit sketch, pretty much continuing the same job that we did on Cut 2D, and just do the same thing here. Now you can see that the progress bar here and the fact that I've got the swirly circle means that this is actually having to do a fair bit of calculation, and this is why I cut all that geometry out of the original PDF before I imported it in here. So anyway, what we need to do is, first of all, we need to get rid of all this geometry that we don't need, and then we need to turn these lines here, and you see these curves where they're made up of segments. We need to turn those into T-splines, and that's pretty easy to do. You just go up to sketch, you go to the spline tool, start at the first point in that particular curve and move it along to the next point, press the mouse button and just keep working your way along. You can get away in some instances with skipping some of the points on the original diagram. It will be close enough. I'm going to stop it there, but I would normally work all the way around this. And then what we can do is we can go in with the select tool and we can select the original line, and you can tell if you've selected the original line because all those green handle points won't come up. He says, not being able to. There we go, zoom in closer. There we go, we've selected one of the lines there. We can press delete. It can be a bit painstaking, but anyway, it gets rid of all of the those segmented lines, gets a nice T-spline, which spline curve, which Fusion 360 works a lot better with. And what we will end up with is something like this one. Bear with me while I just load up the other file. So okay, now one of the other jobs that I did is we can take the points, say for these circles where the volume and the tone control knobs are, we can go and measure those on the original scratch plate, and they're 8mm in diameter, and we can actually draw a proper circle there to replace again the segmented geometry. We can do the same with all the screw holes. So the other thing I've done is measured the original scratch plate for things like the position of the humbucker pickup. So this distance between this line here and this line here, and replicated that, which has meant moving some of these pickup cutouts around. I've also made these filleted rectangle rather than again the segmented curves in the corners. Just to cut down on the amount of geometry that Fusion 360 has to deal with. Similarly for the single coil in the middle, I've measured that as well, so that the distance between this humbucker and the single coil and this humbucker and the single coil are the same. So it's in the centre, if you like, of the distance between the two. And also we know that this humbucker is essentially, the cutout for that is up against the neck pocket. So an area that did need a lot of adjustment was this point here. It wasn't particularly good on the original scratch plate that came with the guitar, so I've made some adjustments to make it match the lower horn a little bit better, and also made some adjustments on here. Now to check this out, what we will do is we'll print this actually out onto a piece of A3 paper, and then we'll cut it out, put it on the guitar and check the fit. Okay, so we've got our paper template. I've just wiggled that underneath the strings and put it in place. Took the tip off the selector and the volume and tone knob pots off, and I can see that we've got a couple of areas where we need some adjustment. So this is overhanging this by far too much, so that needs that edge needs bringing back. We've got to adjust this piece here, it's not quite matching the profile. Some of the screws are generally in the right place, which is a good thing. You can usually tell that just by punching through. I think that one's out slightly, so is that one. That one's pretty much spot on. That could do with a bit of adjustment. So got a couple of minor adjustments to make on where the screw holes are positioned. This one here, this one here. Yeah, the others are okay, I guess. Oh, let's just check this one. Yeah, that one's in. Our pots and our slot are in the right place, and so are the two screws there. So they don't need adjusting. Everything else looks okay, so we've got pickups in the right place, and those are all spaced correctly. And we've got the right radius and fit around the tremolo. But we'll make some adjustments and then we'll come back, and really it's a case of making adjustments, doing another printout, checking to see how it fits, making adjustments, and basically creeping up to the end result. And there you go, look, it took 1, 2, 3, 4 different goes just to make final adjustments to it, to the point where I'm confident enough that it's all in the right place. And the main thing that I wanted to adjust was actually this piece here, where the point here on the lower horn doesn't actually match the rest of the profile very well, so I've moved that up and out a bit so it looks a bit more aggressive and looks also like it's matching a bit better. Okay, so what we should be able to do now is output the tool paths for this and head over to the CNC machine and start cutting. So let's get on with that. There we go, needs a bit of clean up around the edges, probably a bit of 400 wet and dry, just to get rid of some of these stuck on chips, but there we go. So let's head back to the guitar and get this fitted. Right, that's got copper on the back. We can do a quick check for continuity, just to make sure that the adhesive is conducting properly, and it is. Look, we've got, and it says, yeah. So that makes sure that the guitar's properly shielded. Quick tip on neck adjustments. Now, I've just taken the strings off of here, just clip them off out of the way over there for now, and put the straight edge on. And what you should do is every time you make an adjustment, it's best to actually leave the neck for half an hour after you've made an adjustment at least, just to let it settle again with the new tension. So I've just taken the strings off of this, left it about half an hour or so, come back, put the straight edge on, and what I thought was going to be a very slight back bow is actually quite large. It's probably about 1 millimetre of bow, so if I push this end of the flat edge down onto the first fret, this side actually is more, probably closer actually to 2 millimetres. So there's a back bow on here that I need to take out, so it's just basically going to mean increasing the tension on the truss rod. But every time I do that, I'm only going to make probably about an 1/8 to a 1/16 of a turn each time, and then leave it for half an hour and then measure it, because sometimes it will take a while for the truss rod tension and the neck to actually respond. Right, we're ready to take the tape off of here, because I've finished the fret job on here. Just to run over what I use for fret levelling and polishing. So using a fret levelling file to level the frets to start with, once I'm sure that the neck's straight, or as close to straight as I can get it with the notched straight edge. Then once it's level, use a file to re-establish the crown, and then I use about 3 grades of wet and dry paper, so a 6, an 800 and 1000 grit, to basically take the file marks out, and then using a Dremel with a polishing head and 2 different polishing compounds. So I tend to use the heavy cut one to start with, and then this is kind of a mid actually. There's no need to go to a final finish like you would do on a clear coat on a car. So finish up on that compound, and that gets you a nice set of smooth shiny frets that you're going to be able to bend the strings over without it feeling like sandpaper under your fingertips. Right, so I'm going to get all this tape off of here and get the scratch plate on, and we should be pretty much done then. Okay, it's tuned up, and there we are. So one upgraded JEM Junior. So let's just run through what we did to it. First thing we need to do is give it a good clean up, because there was still buffing compound in areas like the grip here. We needed to set up the trem system so that the springs counterbalance the strings properly, and that the trem system remained parallel with or flush with the body. Then we've restrung it, because why not? We've changed the gold fonted tone and volume knob with gunmetal grey, recut the scratch plate on CNC, which now kind of fits properly and also has better, more even lower horn point there. We've done a complete fret job on this and neck job, so we've straightened the neck, and then we've flattened the frets and re-crowned and polished those, so that took a fair old while, and then we put it all back together, and it's not too bad at all. So that's all pretty good. Okay, let's go and plug it in and try it. Seems to work all right. So I think we'll stop that there before it gets too embarrassing. And yeah, certainly learning a few techniques on this guitar that I haven't really got to grips with before, like legato runs and stuff. So yeah, it's proving to be quite successful, and I really enjoy playing it. So it's definitely a keeper. And so thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.